Poems to a Listener, readings and conversation with contemporary poets.
There seems almost nothing to hold on to now. Nothing. Home drifts on farther away, like a late wish in the wind. And the corner I stand in seems frozen over and dead. There's nothing here now. Nothing back there either. Whispers sneak over everything. Everything's cold and clear.
Welcome to Poems to a Listener. I'm Henry Lyman, and in this half-hour program, we'll be talking with Jamaican poet, novelist, and playwright Andrew Salkey, and listening to poems drawn mostly from his book, Away, published by Allison and Busby. The poem we just heard describes the very feeling of being away, somewhere profoundly far away, where one is left with a sense of having been abandoned.
I've been away for 32 years. 32 years I've been away from home, Jamaica. You feel abandoned sometimes when you're away from that which nourishes you and gives you semblance and gives you personality.
Is that why home keeps drifting away?
I think it is why home keeps drifting away, because the main strength that you should derive from home is absent.
There is nothing here, the poem says. Yet at the same time you say there's nothing back there either.
Yes, home seemed a place that I know I loved, but I know, too, that it could do with massive changes, social and political. Away, here I am, in search of a country, trying hard to find myself a land of fruit trees to return to, a sweet mango, perhaps, with my mother's face on its slowly yellowing skin, my father's own exile, scattered among the leaves, my brother's immaturity and my own, nervously leaping up and down on the stones and trash, which hide the roots from all of us.
The poem pictures your home in Jamaica as a mango tree, whose roots are hidden.
We are an African people, transferred to the Caribbean through slavery in the Middle Passage. So those roots are well, deeply buried.
What are the stones and trash that hide the roots?
Things imported. Things that came in on us as a people. Borrowed things. And these hide, conceal certain things of native value, of native truth.
Trash implies something very concrete, actually. Something almost visible.
Surely,
tangible.
It really means something that isn't necessary, that we're covered over by wanton stuff, useless stuff.
Is that why your mother's face, which is the mango fruit itself, is perishing? Is that why the tree seems to be fading? Is that why your father is exiled among the leaves?
Yes. Really, the strength is ebbing.
You see yourself, as a boy, nervously leaping up and down on those stones and on that trash.
Yes.
The child seems to sense that something is wrong here.
Yes, yes. The leaping is not a good excitement at all. It's another kind of emptiness to cope with, this leaping up and down.
Another kind of exile?
Mm-hmm. An exile from true expectations, from a good promise of some sort. Yes, I am one of those who left the island, but I'm also one of those few who remained behind. I never left. I stood up to the glass houses, sugar refracted in their prisms. Caribbean's labor looked structured, polished, and monumental. I faced shadows in limping London, and for short bursts in demented New York and mean-spirited Paris, where they all see splintered reflections of their past, over there, anywhere, already proving a shared alienation too visibly, too palpably here, but where I respond all of a piece, as my old, new self spliced, locked, and bolted by the sea I never left. The songs I hummed away from home, then and now, were not and can't be folk songs, earning metropolitan slaps on the back. They've always been authentic. They've always sounded distant, out of true, out of the place I never left. Just consider, for a moment, the style of some of those who stayed. Dry land tourists, inner emigres, North Americans deferred. Incredible mirror images. Shouldn't they have gone abroad instead of staying put and being so far removed from the native truth? Instead of turning away from the guinep tree, the restlessness of the sea, instead of exiling myself away from my everydayness, I left the island so that I wouldn't have to leave. I left the island I never left.
So you never really left?
I don't feel that I have left.
You left in order?
In order to see more clearly.
In order to see under those stones and trash, maybe?
Indeed.
What had been laid on the roots.
That's right. Chicanery, false treaties, cajoling, murder, and so on.
What happened to those who did stay? You refer to them in the poem as inner emigres.
Dissatisfied with what was there in the culture, wanting to be other persons, wanting to be, Americans and Canadians and English women, English men, wanting to be other than who you are.
Do you see that as a form of exile?
Exile within the island and exile within themselves. Most of them distanced themselves from the people of the island, the peasantry, the working class. They grabbed. I feel that those who joined hands with the oppressive and repressive forces in the island, I feel that I can't face them. I do not want to have to be with them. Sometimes, there's a tremendous conflict because one wants to return.
And you did. You did go back.
Indeed, yes.
What did you find?
Pictures that were good and pictures that were bothersome, haunting, tormenting. The whole thing was still being sold, soft and sweet, hot and quick. The easy kill was just as quiet as I had left it years and years before. Distant master, remote control, local whore. Call it what you may, new dependent-mindedness, the situation was an ugly, sunny, free-for-all for the well-chosen, well-placed few. An island's intentionally spread legs and well-dressed elected sellouts are always ready takers of laissez-faire, whose lavish tips are never entered on any of the official ledger slips.
So when you returned to Jamaica, you found it in a state of economic prostitution?
Absolutely. The island was being sold. The culture was being sold. The labor sold for little or nothing.
Who were the sellers?
The black bourgeoisie, the educated folks, my people, my class. And it was dreadful. One couldn't really even stand what they said to you. You would complain, and you would be met with statements like, well, you know, America's very powerful. Castro is one thing, but America's another. Change is impossible. And after all, we like it the way it is.
So they were selling to America, basically. America.
Canada, America. And,
the Northeast.
Yes, and also to Britain.
So these were the clients.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
The buyers and the sellers seem to intertwine in the poem, in a kind of free-for-all, as you say. A laissez-faire free-for-all?
They are inextricable, the buyers and sellers. The repressive force and the selling agent really do become one in order to make the deal work. There's a kind of treachery on the part of, let's say, the native person that makes the native person go close to the buyer, doing the Yankee thing, as they would call it.
So they grew very far away from the roots.
Very, very far away, while being next to the roots.
Because they were there.
Yes, indeed.
In the back country of Jamaica.
Yes, yes. That heartland, the peasant, the agricultural worker, must not be included when you hear the word or the phrase sell out. They're not selling out. They're not engaging in the laissez-faire.
Yeah, they're excluded from it.
They're absolutely excluded, yes, indeed. He came back by plane, train, bus, and cart. His expectations were plain. Family, eye-corner familiarity, back-home self, or so he thought. During the last stretch on foot, over the hard dirt road, a beggar smiled at him, and he held out his left hand like a reaping hook. He gave him nearly all his small change. Further along the way, a tatter of children offered him pebbly mangoes at a price. He handed over the rest of his change without taking the mangoes. On the narrative veranda, where all the village tales had perched and taken off again, his mother stood, as light as the money he had just given away. In his embrace, her body, wrapped wire, felt smaller than he remembered, her face drawn tight and frightened. Everything was diminished, whittled by long urban knives. The road outside, the front garden, the lean-to house, the backyard, the lives. All his family and neighbors were knocking softly at death's door, waiting patiently. Spit fringing their cracked lips, wizened frowns, sliding all the way into the collapsed cheeks. The villagers clawed at him and what little he had brought back. They picked him clean as a eucalyptus. He quickly saw that home was a dry river bed. He knew he'd have to run away again, or stay and be clawed to death by the eagle hovering over the village. Nothing had changed. He walked alone for a while. Not even his footprints sank behind him in the dust. No niche, no bounce back, no mirror anywhere in which to see himself, merely the sunlight, mocking everybody, everywhere, and the circling eagle.
So this is what you find when you go into the interior.
What anyone would find, anyone of sensitivity. It's up front, it's visible, the poverty.
What might the eagle represent?
North American economic forces, forces of extraction, of wealth.
The eagle is clawing the island from above, from a distance.
Yes, it hasn't even got to land, really.
Mm-hmm.
This is all done by telephone, by telex.
Vicariously.
It's done by sending things down to be sold. And the loans that are extended are loans with inextricable, knotty, very, very knotty tendrils.
The roots get lost.
The roots get damaged. I mean, the things that we should believe in and we should celebrate become wounded with the clawing.
But there are some who still hold on to the roots.
Mainly in the country parts, yes.
Who remain rooted.
Yes, that's right. In the country parishes. You always find that the people who live in the interior are the last to let go of the real, true society. Like the shock absorber she is, veranda stop to all passers-by, to those who travel and return, to those who stayed and stayed. She sits between the water mint and the flowering bitter aloes in the cracks of the new colony, believing in the honeycomb shapes spliced into the dividing twilight, believing, contrary to the logic of the coming earthquake season, believing my ordinary, everyday words are the life of my world, and taking to heart, at least once, my way of seeing the world whole, for as long as my heart lasts.
Who is this woman?
She is my mother. She is my island, the people I come from, the society that produced me. But the central focus is the experience of my mother.
The everyday?
The everyday, the everydayness of her.
The language she uses, she says in the poem that her everyday, ordinary words are her way of seeing the world whole, seeing her world whole.
Yes. My mother, like the island, entrenched as they were and are in problems and poverty and underdevelopment, are constantly making a bid for the positive, making a bid for hope. There is a way of fighting without known weapons, and I found that my mother and her generation knew about this. They would fight back with narrative, with stories, obliquely setting the balance right.
A stab of hope.
That's right. I love taking that feeling away with me after listening to her and to the other elders. And on moonlight nights, in an open area, sometimes it was called a barbecue on which you dried beans and coffee beans and so on. We would sit.
And that's when the stories would come up.
And that's when the stories would just simply pour out and bubble over.
From the cracks of the new colony.
That's right.
Where she sits.
Yes.
She's rooted in those cracks. She is the roots, is she not?
Indeed, she's the honeycomb, the sweetness. her everydayness, her domestic side, the home, the work in the home, had a language of hope.
Despite the conditions.
Despite the external gravity and the external horror and the hunger. Those whom we left behind when we took history's trail abroad, those whom we left sitting on the hillside slope, with their backs resting on the brightly painted substantial up-for-sale signs, on the bank by the dry riverbed, by the dusty roadway to the airport, they all seem unable to die of hunger, like the screen and magazine millions in the Emperor's barracoons, Mahatma's vast backyard, Mohammed's mountain wastelands, Soweto's steam heat dirt track, Bolivia's brutal other world, and everywhere else on the wrong side of the long line of fat. They all seem unable to die like flies, some paid writers, isolated sweetly in paradise and recognition, theoretically complain. It's possible at a guess, I suppose, that those storytellers see the sun making a crucial difference to the spreading fainting spell, axing pain in the head, spit-fringed lips, drooping shoulders, skin-tight rib cage, premature grey hair, closed ministry doors, bureaucratic hush, absence of welfare, like an aching amputation. Those who starve, starve and starve alike. We who look on reading or writing in a cool room or in a deeply heated one look alike. The sun shines down on both clusters of the dying, at home and abroad.
The hungry, everywhere, in Jamaica and elsewhere too, are slowly dying. But we who are looking at them from a distance are dying also.
Because of the strange view of suffering, I think. It's suffering beheld at a distance. And to be very frank with you, it's a kind of suffering that doesn't educate the heart.
It doesn't educate the heart.
It isn't near enough to be impressive on the heart. I sometimes feel that maybe if we were conjoined,
We would find ourselves there somehow?
somehow we'd feel, feel our way, feel the other person in a better way.
And recognize perhaps that they're actually part of us?
That we are, in fact, one social entity. We are human. There's oneness in spite of the multiplicity of differences and divergences. We are really one person, all these persons in the world. That's the oneness I'm talking about.
So it's a question of identifying then with the other. Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes. Very difficult. Possibly it needs a practiced head and a practiced heart to do that, to achieve that kind of view of humanity.
To see each other as one whole thing?
To see all the parts as being a glorious whole and a truly meaningful whole.
Is that a kind of home?
Yes, the root, the place where we stand, the place that means everything coming together all at once, the true base, home. Home is like that. She listens and smiles when I call her name. I've been so far away for so long that my calling voice is arcing thin with whispers and bruising regrets, with corner dust and stifled panic. True, Distance is as distance does. Love's a daily, sandy, uphill thing, lived in the light of day, looking like nothing more than small duties, an inch at a time, a bent back here, a quick, unannounced sacrifice there, an old struggle with shadows that shift and twist, an embedded rock that stays and stays in spite of wind and rain, and nights without days. I won't pretend I'm trying hard to return. I wanted to leave, but I've stayed away far closer to home than I had reckoned on. Home's where I find my thoughts stripped, bone-plain and graspable, clear as craft. Then there's the other backyard on the run, the one that puts out jasmine by the standpipe, idle chatter that's wilder than promises of revolt, the one that puts geography and law in its place, as though there's no other world but ours here, the one that puts on stubborn white in muddy times and sports nursery-grown gardenias at funerals. I carry both homes like carnivals in my head, each crashing against the other like outrages of concertinaed opposites, conflicts with time, history then, and as it is in the making now. Let's say that neither is mine to hold on to. Let's say that where I am is where home's a figment of imagination, of pretense, of homing in on home, away from home. What's real is what I left behind. We've said it. And there's the pain. I've stopped dreaming, cut my containable madness. I'm alone. Funny, but now I think I've located it at last. It's in the space between the sounds of carnivals. It's in the solitude jammed on either side by ego noises and contrary moving pictures in my mind. It's in the breathing breaks, in the spasms of caught breaths, in odd moments of faith clustered round with bright distractions of how things were and how they should be. Home won't be corralled. She bucks and protests in the silences I keep. She is herself. Herself.
We've been talking with Jamaican poet Andrew Salkey and listening to poems drawn mostly from his book, Away, published by Allison and Busby. I'm Henry Lyman. Thanks for joining us.
Poems to a Listener was produced by Henry Lyman in cooperation with WFCR Amherst, Massachusetts. Financial assistance was provided by the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Massachusetts Foundation for Humanities and Public Policy.